Well, hello and welcome to the Capital Conversation with me, Michael Heyman. Now, my guest today is Martha Lane Fox, the internet pioneer and now peer of the realm. From transforming travel through lastminute.com to democratising digital. Try saying that with your teeth in. Democratising digital through Doteveryone. She's one of Britain's leading voices, not only in the tech debate, but the conversation about the future of this country. She also sits on the boards of Twitter and Chanel, to say but a few, not to mention being co-founder of the legendary karaoke bar Lucky Voice. Martha, welcome to the show.
Keyword legendary. I like
legendary.
that. Legendary Lucky Voice.
Quite a legendary CV. Tell us a little bit about it. I mean, you're so well known in the world of tech. I mean, you've just joined the board of Twitter. What are you making of it now you're in the world of big tech as well as entrepreneurial tech?
Well, you know what? It's a funny thing I think Twitter would say themselves. Twitter still feels and thinks quite like a startup, and that's a good thing. You know, Twitter is not Facebook or Amazon or Google or Microsoft. It's a company of 3,000 employees, just made a profit. It's got this insane global reach. It's in a phenomenally interesting position. Geopolitically, they never would have guessed that this would be the
share
world
price is
they're in.
back on the way up.
Share price is back on the way up. But, you know, it's still a relatively small company, and it's learning all the time, and it's certainly led from the top by Jack wanting to build a positive contribution to the world. And I think
right, I mean, this is Jack Dorsey,
yes.
well known as the founder of Twitter, but also one of a group of very high-profile entrepreneurs that are very much in focus at the moment in terms of where they're taking us. I mean, do you get a sense that the shine has slightly come off tech in terms of the Cambridge Analytica and Facebook sort of blow up, the sort of Uber sort of blow up here in London? I mean, do you get a sense that we don't quite see the technological entrepreneur in the way that we did a few years ago?
I think so, but I think that's a good thing. I don't believe in gods, and I think it's unhealthy. So I think of it from a number of angles. Firstly, you know, the internet has been around for about 30 years, maybe a bit longer. The commercial internet has been around for about that time. And it's like we're having a bit of a shakeout. You know, I think because maybe I'm 45, it feels a bit like a midlife crisis. We're thinking, oh my God, some of the things we did not intend to be consequences are consequences. And we as people are looking at what's happening with children's relationship to some of this stuff, what's happening with the vulnerable, or what's happening with exclusion, diversity, and all these things.
OK, so I interviewed Jimmy Wales, the Wikipedia founder. I mean, and he said a pretty similar thing, which he said, we never thought the internet would work out to be like this. Can it be fixed, or is it now?
Of course it
just,
can.
So it can be. So,
yeah,
so
I'm extremely optimistic about the future of technology, and I think it's quite important that we don't become Luddite, and we have to be progressive in how we see this. We can't take technology out of our lives, so we have to harness it and channel it for something positive.
Right.
You know, I think we need to think about legislating and regulating the internet in an effective way, not a knee-jerk way, but an effective long-term way. We have to think about helping people understand the internet better and give them the tools to be a bit more curious and interested in these things. And we have to demand that the corporates themselves, the companies, do a better job at being responsible.
But basically, these firms are making the world a better place, in your view, are they?
No, it's not that binary.
It's not that binary.
It's much more nuanced than that. Some are. Some aren't. Some are doing both. I think that the thing that I am interested in particularly is, you know, how we can make sure that at the systems level, we're not enabling more of the bad things to happen, we're enabling more of the good things to happen.
So let's just touch on diversity, because this is not an area where tech is shining right now.
No, it's appalling.
You've made the point that Parliament is a 500-year-old institution. It's got a better record on diversity than a 25-year-old sector.
It's got a higher percentage of a small group of people, but still, back to the point, you know.
But it still makes the
It's awful.
The point,
it's one of the things that I feel most depressed and dispirited about. You know, I felt as though it was kind of exciting 20 years ago. I thought maybe this was going to be a different wave of entrepreneurship, different voices, different people doing different things.
And a different generation.
That has not happened. You know, there are far fewer women than there should be in the sector, partly about power, money, about creating good products and services. And I feel anxious as a woman staring into the future, where you're going to believe that the big industries of the future are going to be around blockchain, crypto, cyber, AI. These are industries where there are even fewer women than some of the other bits of the internet. It profoundly matters for us as humans.
I mean, when you were sort of, you know, in the early days of lastminute.com, did you sort of see yourself as potentially part of a new wave of empowered female business leaders that would use technology as the game changer?
I don't think you know, age 25, as we sat in the chaos of lastminute.com, scrabbling to get flight tickets for everybody. I wasn't sitting thinking I could be an empowered female business leader. I was just trying to help Brent do the best job we can for our customers, and I'm not. You know,
but you were very much in the public eye as the shape of things to come.
That was a different thing. I think that where I look back now, and that's what perhaps is interesting about the story of lastminute.com, is that lastminute.com was, you know, people were quite interested at lastminute.com. What they were really interested in was two relatively young people talking about what was going to happen to the world because of this technology. And, you know, partly because I was a young woman and that was unusual, we just attracted a lot of attention about that story.
But if you think of a word that you often lock in with technology, it's progressive, right? So in terms of the sense of it changing things, why do you think it has done such a bad job on this issue of diversity? Why is it so male-dominated?
It's a whole bunch of reasons. You know, I look back to look forwards. I'm happy and lucky to be friends with an amazing woman called Dame Stephanie Shirley. I'm sure you know Stevie Shirley. She was one of Britain's great entrepreneurs. She came here on the Kinder Transport when she was tiny. She started a software development company in the 1960s. All women, all working from home, programming government contracts like the black box for Concorde. And when I talk to her now, she's an old lady clearly, but she says, what happened? You know, we gave all these incredible ideas in the 1960s and 70s and we've gone backwards. So something happened in the 80s and 90s as became sort of management heavy. It became incredibly led from a very small area of the world. And, you know, now having been to Silicon Valley a few times through partly Twitter and others, you see that the huge platform businesses that grew up so quickly through the late 90s and last decade were from such a small cultural reference point that then they hired people like them. There was sort of that cultural thing that happens so quickly, and all of a sudden you've got industries created that just look very
So you've created
similar.
a generation, but do you think in a future generation there's enough being done now?
No, I don't think there's enough.
So we've still got a long way to go.
There's not nearly enough being done, and it really, really matters because, as I said, right now there are 600,000 empty jobs in the tech sector in the UK, forecast to be 1 million by 2020. You are never going to be out of work if you understand technology. I can't code.
So it's in everyone's interest to get this right.
I can't code. I'm an ancient historian, but we need to involve more people in the workforce. That's got to come from a wider pool, especially women. But it's also about creating good products.
Right.
You know, I feel very anxious about sex bots, about voice boxes sitting in the corner that you shout a woman's name at. Alexa, do this, which talks back to you in a female voice. No, please and thank you.
So Alexa is actually
I think
part
this
of the
is,
problem.
well, I think we should be thinking about this, and I don't think if you have a broader set of people designing the products, you will have this set of much more kind of culturally limited
So our viewers
idea.
need to be kinder to Alexa. I think that's the...
Please say please and
I'm
thank
sure
you to
they have.
Alexa.
Now, tell us about Doteveryone.
Doteveryone is an organisation I started after I gave the Dimbleby lecture on BBC 3 years ago. It felt as though the technology, as you've already said, the shine was coming off it, and we've got to keep fighting for the everyone part of all of this to make sure that technology works for everyone. It's not just for the few. And
Is it an elite sport, do you think?
Well, it depends what angle you're looking at it from. I was heavily involved setting up the government digital service in government, did a huge amount of work reimagining how government uses the internet. We created gov.uk and a whole bunch of things. And, you know, that was a product and a service built for everyone, not, you know, by a small group of people, for a small group of people. So it is possible to be for everyone. I think, though, that now is the moment to make sure we're putting responsibility at the heart of how we think about these things. We're trying to rebuild a responsible tech movement in Europe. That's about helping all of the bits of the puzzle that I said about you as an individual understanding a bit more about how technology works. We're doing a big public education campaign at the minute. It's about companies thinking about responsibility and how they design these things. And it's about legislation and how you use the law to make companies responsible.
All that's the good stuff, but you've made the point that our political class are woefully unprepared for what's coming.
I mean, who's surprised? You know, I find it hard to keep up with this stuff,
well,
and
we
I
might
need to
have
think
hoped for
about
better,
it. Or
right?
maybe, but I think it's easy to give politicians all the blame for this. It's really difficult to keep up with the complex set of changing things that are happening in the world. They work very hard. They work in very constricted circumstances with often limited resources, and they're looking at health legislation, education legislation. They're worrying about their constituents to then keep on top of what's happening with technology. That's quite a big ask.
But when you saw the US Senate and you saw the European Parliament try and hold Mark Zuckerberg to account,
it's very depressing.
Did you wince?
I did wince.
I mean, because you're a parliamentarian, right, as
yes,
well?
In a funny capacity, yes. But I did wince, but I felt for them. You know, no one gets out of bed to do a bad job in the morning. I don't believe that's how human beings operate. It's hard to get a handle on these subjects. That's why I think we need a consistent programme of help. We need to recognise that one of the most important gaps to fill is between policymakers and legislators in the technological world that we're in. Otherwise, we're always going to get bad decisions made on behalf of us with our money.
Right. I mean, we hear about this phrase, the techlash, the idea of the backlash, blaming technology for everything from election rigging to fake news. I mean, do you worry that politicians are going to see technology as the force they can blame for all the world's ills?
Well, I think that's really exactly the point. And right now, no one is going to lose a vote by stabbing the internet. You know, I am personally tired of ill-informed MPs being kind of really quick to react and blame everything on the internet or blame everything on social media.
Is that what they do in your view? I mean, is that what you see in the debates?
Occasionally, yes, and I think that when it comes anything from homeland security through to children and education, very often there's a catch-all thing of blame the internet.
Theresa May talks about Russia weaponising the internet.
Yes.
I mean, is there any truth in that?
Yeah, no, I think that's a completely separate issue.
Right.
There are clearly areas of the world
abuses.
that are using the internet in a totally different way to how the Western liberal, in the broadest sense, world has seen it and used it. And I've been speaking quite a lot recently saying, we are very worried about the grip of Silicon Valley on all of our devices and the power of these monopolies, and that's probably right, but let's not forget that China is building a parallel internet where it has a completely different relationship to it and therefore its citizens, where it's controlling things in a very alarming way using technology. Russia has absolutely weaponized the internet. It's built a huge army of people who are very effective at undermining the things that we sort of take for granted in a living, breathing democracy. Iran, the same, building a capacity that's different. North Korea, been using Bitcoin to fund some of its capacity and military activity. So these are the things, if we look east, not west, we'll find some very different things to be concerned about.
Right, we're going to have to leave it there, but we're going to be back, and we'll be back in a very short moment. Welcome back. Now, my guest today is the entrepreneur and campaigner, Martha Lane Fox. Now, Martha, we went into the break asking this question about a campaign that you're involved with.
Yep.
Brexit, is it worth it? Now, that sounded to me like a L'Oreal commercial. Are you worth it? But haven't we already answered this question? We think it isn't.
I would say some people did answer that question, but I'm not sure they answered it with all the information. And I think that, I'm a massively passionate pro-Remainer, and that is, absolutely on the table. So how do you ask a
question?
To the point, even I had not appreciated the cost and complexity of a potential Brexit. And I think it's always worth stopping and pausing in decisions. Any business leader, you're an entrepreneur, I'm a semi-entrepreneur, you look at information as it emerges and you work out whether this is still the best course of action. So the campaign was focused on going around the country, into towns, to ask people if they had questions about the cost particularly, but also about the complexity of leaving the legislative process and so on, and see whether people still felt it was worth it.
Is this a front for a second vote?
This campaign is not. There is absolutely open campaigns for a second vote. I don't know what I feel about that. As again a Remainer, I'd be anxious that we might not go the way we all hoped it might go. But I think that it is always worth pausing. I personally think that, as the Brexiteers presumably have been arguing, Parliament is sovereign. We should be sovereign in these decisions. MPs should be making these decisions for us. I'm very happy if they take control of this a bit more and show a bit more gumption. Don't just get whipped in submission, but talk openly about how they're feeling, about what the numbers are, what we're seeing as the likely costs in all different spheres. So that's what I would like to see happen.
So get the point that you don't like it, you don't want Brexit, but it may well happen.
Yep.
In fact, it's highly likely to happen next year. And one of the things you've been speaking a little bit about is about one of the opportunities in a post-Brexit world might well be the digital opportunity.
No.
Tell us more.
I think I've said it slightly differently. I think it has to be focused around digital. The internet is the organising principle of our time. I don't believe the UK is organised around it. I think the countries that are ones that will be successful in the future.
So
to me, it's
are there
not
some good
optional.
examples? Give us an example of a good country.
China is clearly organising itself around the internet. Slightly bigger in scale to us, but there are...
One that has a more democratic feel, perhaps?
South Korea is perhaps a better example. South Korea thought when it was building itself again after the war that it would put technology at the heart of how it rebuilt itself. I don't believe we have very good technology vision in this country. I think that...
you've used the word sleepwalking.
Well, I've used that a bit about individuals and how they, how we all use technology. But I think what I'd say is that we've got some ministers, like our Culture Secretary, Matt Hancock, does a great job at championing tech, but he doesn't have all the power to reimagine Britain in the modern age. And that isn't just about championing startups. It's got to be a thinking about, OK, look at the health service in detail and complexity. How do we reimagine it for the modern age? Look at education. How do we give teachers the tools to be able to equip young people for the world that they're going to go out into? It's incredibly detailed, complex work.
Will it be the state that does that, or do you think increasingly business is going to have to come up with the answers?
I think it has to be a combination of the both, but where I think it's successful, and I mentioned government digital service, we had success with that because leadership came from the top. And love or loathe David Cameron, he did believe in the digital world and he knew that it was important, and that gave massive headroom to some of the big leaps forward that happened under his tenure. So I think that, you know, in both parties there's an absence of leadership and vision.
So the political class at the moment is tending more towards the loathe than the love, do you think?
Yes, I do, and I think that we need to have a much bolder, not just saying we're going to be the best place for a digital business and we have a best place for a digital economy. That's right, but we also need to build society, we need to build resilience, we need to make sure all of our communities, especially those that voted for Brexit, and I did some interesting work where I mapped people who voted for Brexit with people who do not have access to the internet and don't use it. Guess what? It's pretty much an exact map. Now, I'm not saying that was the cause, of course not, but there's a correlation to areas that are very rural or very poor, feeling as though the world has left them behind. And those are the things that we have to put at the heart of how we rebuild our society.
So government needs to get its act together.
Yep.
What do you make of something in London right now, like Uber and getting its licence going forward? I mean, is that an example of they're learning their lessons and they're moving on, or do they still have much more to go?
I hope that they are. I don't believe that necessarily the right thing was taking Uber's licence away forever. You know, Uber is an extraordinary thing that gives lots of people opportunity. I think clearly there was something very wrong in that company, and I'm sure that the present management are going to take a very different approach. I hope they do, and I think people will watch it, and I think people will vote with their feet. You know, I don't think people will use Uber if they feel as though either it's screwing over the drivers or them, or it's screwing over us as a city.
And this issue about something very wrong, it's often what people feel when they look at this very young sector with all of this power, with these huge expectations that it's going to deliver solutions for everything from health to travel to all the sort of the key things. In terms of what it needs to learn to make the most of this, to actually give us that post-Brexit future, what's the job it has to do?
Well, I completely agree with you. You know, Doteveryone did some research, the first kind of depth attitude research that has been done in the UK. 50% of people, individuals, said that they thought the technology has helped them individually every day. 50%. But only 12% thought that it had helped society. And that's the thing, right? And I think that the tech sector itself has been so busy innovating and building products and building companies, maybe sometimes hasn't quite seen the ripple effect out from those products and services. So we have to hold them to account.
I mean some of your Doteveryone research shows that there is a profound uneasiness about where tech might be taking us at the moment. Is there a redress to this? How do we get optimistic about the shape of things?
It's this back to the systems piece. I think that it's partly about people feeling like they understand it more. It is uneasy if you don't know where your data's going, you don't know what the transaction is on the internet, you don't know why advertising follows you around, you don't know what exactly is going on behind this very invisible, you know, screen, whatever the thing, however you're looking at the service. So we can help people understand that a bit more, and that I think will help. But we also definitely need to hold companies' feet to the fire, and we need to make sure that they are thinking about responsible design. They're being very clear with their terms and conditions. They're being very clear with, you know, the very ease of communication about all the things that they do, both with your data, but also with, you know, more hard transactions and the way that those things work. So I think it's no one piece, it's that whole bit.
You get the sense that when you look at big, older, established businesses like M&S in your case, they were keen to get young technologists into the firm to help them find their feet in a digital future. Do you think the digital world needs to actually get some of the old school expertise into it to sort of learn about how it deals with things like trust and reputation? Do you think there's something in that?
I do and I don't. I think that, you know, big companies that have lived for a long time also have issues of trust. There's, you know, we're living in a world where it's harder to earn trust and it gets eroded quickly. And of course, it's important, I think, to have a diverse set of voices in any culture. I don't think it's about one thing being right or being wrong. That's why different races, different genders, different class backgrounds are fundamental to success, and they've shown that again and again and again. So M&S wouldn't exist if it was just all people who were looking backwards. It needs to have some young blood in it too. Twitter wouldn't exist if it was all just people looking forwards.
So this is what progress is about.
It's just got to be about all of those multidisciplinary skills.
Okay, I'm going to wave my magic wand. I want to take you back to lastminute.com.
I look a lot better.
It's like, I mean,
fewer scars. I look a lot better.
One of the pioneering. I mean, you know, you're sort of a very young person, but when we look at this industry in terms of the people that pioneered it, there's no doubt that you and Brent Hoberman are two of the principal characters in this country that pioneered digital travel, taking us to parts of the world that we never dreamt of until we actually looked at your website.
£99 flights to New York. Honestly, I could have kissed Haldor Halldorson, who was the Iceland Air sales manager that Brent and I badgered endlessly, poor guy, and finally he said, OK, I'll give you a £99 flight to New York, stopping in Reykjavik for a few minutes, and it was transformational. Nobody had ever imagined that you'd be able to buy something like that, ever. It was really exciting. It felt like we really were at the vanguard.
I mean, you indicated earlier in the interview about the kind of the sense of the chaos, the excitement. I mean, do you miss those days?
No, I don't miss them. wish I'd written
Better
more.
remembered.
No, I wish I'd written more down, because it was clearly an outlying life experience. It's not something that will necessarily ever be repeated for me, clearly, but for many others. And I wish I'd written more down and I could remember it better. I've had so much morphine that I've sort of forgotten too much of the story. But I don't miss it. I miss the incredible sense of opportunity and possibility, because we were basically a group of 25 to 30-year-olds not really knowing what we were doing, sometimes having this incredible luck, sometimes by design, sometimes by complete fluke, and that was an extraordinary thing. So I do miss that.
So what was the learning for yourself there? What did you take out of last minute?
Oh, too many, hundreds of things. I think...
well, less of an entrepreneur running a growth business. What should they take out of it?
I think the thing is that you have to stay ruthlessly focused on your user. And I know people say this all the time, but lots of people say, oh, yes, I do really listen to my customers and I really talk to you. And actually you find that they haven't actually used their own product or their own service for quite some time. You know, Brent and I were the ultimate lastminute.com customers. It came from a place... Well, no, we just wanted to go on a lot of holidays, but also we played with it all the time. I don't think I had a holiday for the first 3 years. But we were on it all the time. Brent was brilliant at being obsessive about the website, and I was brilliant at being obsessive about the branding and the product. And those were the things that really keep you in touch with what people are feeling and saying. And we both used to go through obsessively the customer service emails all the time. We talked to people about it, and that is something you just, whatever your product, just don't lose sight of the people that are actually using it.
So it's that intensity, that focus.
Yes, exactly. And it's interesting looking at Twitter as well. Jack is absolutely signed up to this management idea that Clay Christensen, the Harvard professor, came up with, called jobs to be done. So it's asking, why does somebody hire your company to do a job? What's that job and why are they using you? And I think if you stay close to that and you keep talking to people, then that is the most important thing.
Now,